Hi, Dr. Dyer here, talking about research in human development and family science. Do scientists ever just observe children or observe families in their natural environment, just going through their daily lives? It turns out they do. This is called naturalistic observation. It consists of the scientist observing the subject in their natural environment. But unlike participant observation, the scientist does not interact with the environment, does not interact with the subjects. They essentially stand back and watch what happens naturally. Now, sometimes they observe unobtrusively through the use of video recording or other techniques, but the essence of it is that the environment is what it would naturally be with no attempts to structure it in any way. It's just what happens naturally, and the scientist watches that. One example is from 1989, the question, who cares for children in public places? Do men or women take care of children when those children are observed out in nature, so to speak? What they meant by out in nature were parks and stores and restaurants. And what you see here are essentially the operational definitions they used of who the primary caregiver is. When they observe children in parks and in stores, they define the primary caregiver as the person who was either carrying the child, holding the child's hand, or pushing the baby stroller. In restaurants, they define the primary caregiver as the person who is sitting with the child, but often there's more than one person sitting with the child. So they looked for things like who sets up the high chair, who is assisting with the feeding if the child needs assistance, or who responds if the child cries. So what did they find? Who is taking care of children in public places? This is the percentage of the time that a man is the caretaker. And you can see that almost always it's below 50%. So women are taking care of kids in public places most of the time. But two scenarios there are interesting. When there is a mixed sex dyad, so there's only two adults, one appears to be a man, one appears to be a woman, and there's a small child. And the child could be an infant or a toddler or a preschool, and it really doesn't change this. In those cases, it's kind of 50-50. The men are just as likely as the women to be the ones taking care of the child. And then the only scenario in which men are more likely to be taking care of children in public is if the child is relatively older, preschool age, 3, 4, or 5, and there's a group, there's multiple adults of both sexes. But most of the time it looks like women are the ones taking care of children in public places. They will be narrowly focused on a specific question. This is in contrast to participant observation, which tends to be much broader. The advantage of naturalistic observation is that it has ecological validity, meaning what you see around the kitchen table is what really happens around the kitchen table, because there have been no efforts to structure it, change it, standardize it in any way. It is literally exactly what happens around the dinner table for that family. It is more objective than self-report about behaviors because there's no such thing as a recall bias or social desirability. Now, there are some disadvantages as well, some limitations, some things we have to worry about. For all observation, anytime a person is being watched, they may act differently than if they were not being watched. The second problem with observations is that the observer is a human being who has some biases, and as we all know, you don't see everything, you don't notice everything when you observe the world. Specific to naturalistic observation, one of the limitations is that the observation is not standardized. Variables, therefore, cannot be isolated. So we don't know the circumstances of any of those people walking through the department store. None of that stuff is standardized, and so we have ecological validity. We're seeing what naturally happens, but we don't really have a good handle on what all the variables might be. And finally, naturalistic observation can be sort of inefficient. You might, since you do nothing to structure the observation, you might not get a chance to see the thing you're looking for. So it's inefficient. You might observe for a long, long time without seeing the kinds of behaviors that you're looking for. Naturalistic observation is very often used for prevalence questions about how often behaviors occur naturally.